on Fire, Chapter 39. By mid-afternoon, we arrived in the town of Kratzy with the legal books hidden inside a coffin, which now felt far too ominous. We had expected to be the first to give the warning that soldiers were on their way, but it was obvious from the moment we arrived that the warning had already come. It was as if the entire pulse of the town had changed. Unlike our previous visit, no one came from their homes to greet us, or in from the fields or markets. We'd passed several public places on our way there, and no one was in any of them. Maybe they were huddled in their homes. Huddled, hiding, planning, praying. They knew what was coming. We had barely driven to the door of the church when Ben came out, waving his arms as if to shoo us away. Now, why did you two have to come now? We had to warn everyone. They're warned. Can't you tell? Now go. We have their books, Lucas said. Ben eyed the coffin in the back of our wagon and seemed to understand. Let's unload them and get you two away from here as quickly as possible. Then he glared at me. You should have stayed back with Milda. Why don't you ever do as you're told? Tell me something I can obey, and I will. I wasn't in the mood to be scolded by him, not after all that we'd been through to get here. Ben directed us to drive around to the back of the church where the priest was already waiting at the door. He said, Get inside before someone sees you. We followed him inside as he directed a few men to go out and tend to our horses and get the coffin. I couldn't see how anyone heard him above the hustle of noise and activity inside the church, but his request was obeyed. What is everyone doing? Lucas asked. From where he stood, it must have looked like the people were dismantling their own church, but I stood a little deeper inside the nave and realized that they were passing items belonging to the church to others waiting outside, attempting to rescue them. A woman I had seen here on our last trip pointed at us. They are the book carriers. They can help us get these treasures to safety. No, Ben said, cutting in front of me. That is not their job. Soldiers have arrived, a man called it from a position near a window. Call everyone inside. I wasn't sure where he was stationed, but he must have had a view out front, because four men immediately brushed past us to get to the front of the church where our wagon had just been. Each man held a pitchfork in his hand, like a rifle. The main doors were open barely long enough for me to look out and see a line of Cossack soldiers coming up the hill. The priest said, on orders from the governor in this region, this church is supposed to be burned. He believes that if we have nowhere to worship our God, we'll be forced into worshiping their God. A woman standing near us said, We won't let them burn this church, but if they do, we must get everything out. Please help us. You've gotten out everything that you can, Ben said, stifling a cough. Now, please, for the last time, listen to me and get as far from this place as possible. And let the Cossacks win again? She asked. Two echoes of agreement from the people around her. They will win, Ben said. No matter how many of you are here, it won't matter. They will win. Can't we help? I asked. She's right. We are smugglers. We can't. Ben pointed out the window. What orders do you think these soldiers were given? To back down and let the people have a victory against the Tsar? No, they were just waiting for more soldiers to arrive. And then on and then one side or the other will start a fight that will only end one way, and that is with dead Lithuanians in the street and a church burned to its foundation. Your work is to deliver books. Our work is to do everything we can to free Lithuania. Words are never enough of a weapon. We must help those people fight. No, Audra. For every man we bring to the fight, they can bring 10. For every weapon we can forge out of sickles and sticks and pitchforks, they have rifles and pistols and swords. The only weapons we have is who we are, and that is our words, our stories, our culture. If we preserve them, then there is always a chance for freedom. But to preserve that, we must stay alive. He wanted to say more. I knew he did. But his next words were drowned out by a coughing spasm severe enough to force him to lean against the wall for support. Lucas had a simpler argument. Touching my arm, he said, Ben is right. Our lives are dedicated to saving the books. Maybe others teach from their books or transport them, and that is their purpose. These people are here to save this church. We've got a job to do, and so have they. Reluctantly, I began to follow Ben out the back of the church, but we didn't get far before another group of people entered, those who had been outside helping take objects from the church. More soldiers are coming, a woman said. Then why would you come in here? Ben growled. Go back to your homes. That's what I'm telling you, she said. We can't leave. They've got us surrounded. If we go out there, they'll arrest us. Lucas looked at me. You can find us a way out, Audra. You always do. One of your father's tricks, perhaps? I shook my head. There's no trick for something like this. These soldiers intend to destroy the church with us, with or without us inside. Ben pushed us behind him. Here's what we're going to do. Lucas, you and Audra go as far as the back of the church as you can, and if shots are fired, I want you both inside that coffin that you brought here. What are you going to do? I asked. Ben coughed and then said, I'll help these people fight. Before I could respond, he added, Only me. We have a long night ahead, and no matter how it ends, when news of what's happened here gets out, the anger against Russia will rise more than ever, which means the need for book carriers will be greater than ever. Lucas and I started to protest, but Ben ignored us as he continued pushing us toward the back of the church. We'd only taken a few steps before the first shots were fired out in the street. Was that them or us? Lucas asked. Ben turned back, his face grim. Get inside the coffin and stay there until I come for you, or until it's been silent for an hour. Do you hear me? We're not hiding like cowards while everyone else fights to defend themselves, I said. Ben turned on Lucas, his face reddening with anger. I've seen these fights before, Lucas, and I know how they end. Get her to safety, now. Lucas nodded and grabbed my arm, even more shots were fired. I yanked it away and stopped ahead of him toward the back of the church, furious. Aren't you afraid? He asked. Why are you in such a rush to join the fight? Of course I'm afraid, I said, just as I've been afraid nearly every moment since the day my parents were taken away. But every day I tell myself to push through the fear, because if I do, maybe I will finally carry the book that brings them home. And it never does, never. Smuggling isn't enough, Lucas. Isn't that obvious? At some point, we've got to stand on our feet and face the Cossacks with force. Oh, and force the Russian Empire out of our land. What if tonight is the night we could have made a difference, the night that I could have brought my parents home? But it doesn't happen because I'm hiding inside a coffin instead. I hesitated as we heard more shots firing above and a loud crash directly overhead, as if the soldiers had already broken into the church. Lowering my voice, I said, We can help these people. It's the right thing to do, and you know it. Lucas sighed as if he knew he'd lost the argument. I should have made you stay with Milda, and then I should have stayed too. So what do we do? My eyes were on the door that someone had left slightly ajar. Through it, I couldn't see any soldiers, nor were any shots coming from back here. I suspected when the fighting began, anyone who was here was joined the others out in front of the church. I said, Let's go outside and find a place to see for ourselves what's happening. If there's a way to help, we'll do it. If not, I promise I'll leave with you and escape into the forest. Lucas nodded. That's fair enough. He took a deep breath, gripped the handle of the door, and then said, I told you once that if you began to work with us, there'd be no going back. I wish you hadn't taken me so seriously. I put a hand on his back and pressed him forward, and then with a sigh added, I wish that too. End of chapter 39. Getting excited.